go around.
Oh.
The Red Rider Museum is like a church.
Okay.
You walk in, I've never seen a museum.
I've been to the whole thing that
Yeah, this. You walk in, it's got almost everything in there, just like you do. What do you mean? You go in, you fly. Because it's like.
Okay, this is Christian Kasai with the University of Florida's Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Could you just tell us your full name and where you were born and your birthday?
Well, I will tell you, my full name is Lenora Marshall. I was born in a small town called Snow Lake, Arkansas, which is approximately 35 miles south of Elaine. Yes, and my birthday, I'll tell you, I'm 50 plus.
Okay, can you tell us a little about your parents and what they did?
My dad and mom was a farmer. We farmed our own land. We raised cotton, soybeans. We also raised okra and sold it to a market here in Elaine. That brought us instant cash. My mother was also what you may have called a substitute teacher. She taught school in the Wabash school system, which is approximately 6 or 8 miles from here.
Okay, and then what about your grandparents? Do you know where they're from and what they did?
My grandparents were from Elaine. And also, may I revert a little bit and go back to my dad? My dad was also a part-time policeman in that little small town. Yes. Now, concerning my grandparents, my grandmother was a midwife. She delivered babies, and my granddaddy worked on a farm and did various extra work doing other things.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
My childhood, at the time, I felt like my childhood was one of the most laborious things that anybody could encounter because I had very strict parents. We were not allowed to leave point A and go to point B without their permission. Even I lived on a farm where our land ended, the aunt's land began it, or the uncle's land began it, and we couldn't walk 2 or 3 miles without getting permission from our parents. But I had a great childhood. As I look back on it now, we lived on our own farm and we raised cows, hogs, geese, guinea pigs, you name it, we had it there. My mother raised what is called a truck patch, a huge garden, and she blessed the community. We milked the cows, and she churned the milk and made butter. We shared butter with the neighbors. We killed hogs, and we would share hams with the neighbors, and so I had a great childhood coming up. Mostly around family. I come from a family of 14. There were
Wow.
10 boys and 4 girls. And the subjacent area was filled with cousins, first cousins and second cousins. So, I knew very little about negativity or meeting some things that you meet in life, challenges, because I was just in such a beautiful environment coming up. And I thought at that time that we were so poor, I thought. But as I look back on it, we were super blessed because we used to have our cows sent to the cold storage. They'd cut them up. We ate steak, and we ate high on the hogs and high on the cows. So it was really a good life.
Could you tell us about some of your memories on Main Street and Lee's Grocery?
Here in Elaine, Main Street. And that's one of the things that I'm also researching. But I remember the owner of Lee Street, we called him Pat Lee. And Pat Lee had a booming place. His business was flourishing, so he had crowds of people to just flow in. He had a great business head, business personality. He knew how to bond with people. And he would just welcome them to come in, and he also allowed people to charge at his store and pay later on, or he would also put groceries up and let them pay on it during the summertime, and when winter came, they could, finish paying it and pick the groceries up. Pat sold a variety of things. He kind of sold some happy water as well. And so lots of people came. He had stools and benches in his store where they could just come in and sit down. Now, someone also told me that he had a short order place where he sold hamburgers. I don't remember that, but I do remember a Friday night and Saturday night, his place was packed out, even with out-of-towners. It was really a nice place. And in my adult years, when I had gone to college and came back, and I would go to his store, and I would be talking about my church work and the Lord. And he gave me a nickname. He called me Preacher. He said, "Hey, Preacher," and that's all he'd ever call me, was Preacher. But I liked Pat. He was a really great person.
How did you find your way to Elaine? How did you end up here?
I found my way to Elaine, first of all. Snow Lake is the end of the road. I mean, you can't go any further. Once you go to Snow Lake, you have to come back to reroute to go to DeWitt, Doomers, like that. So we had to come to Elaine if we wanted to purchase clothing, shoes, and so forth. My grandmother, my relatives lived here in Elaine. That was another reason for coming to Elaine. But to come to Elaine and stay, to live, my husband was from here. And so when I married, I ended up in Elaine.
How old were you when you got married and moved here?
How old was I?
Yes, ma'am.
When I got married. All right, you keep aiming at that birthday, aren't you? You want to do the math.
This is all for posterity.
I think I was about 23 when I got married.
Okay. How'd you meet your first husband?
I met my husband. That's a good question. Well, my first and last husband. Because,
that's what I meant.
but I won't tell you
apologize.
how long we've been together, so you can't do the math on that. But I met my husband at a dinner where we were selling food at church to raise money for the Eastern Star. I was a member of the Eastern Star at the time. And my husband came up trying to get me to credit him a slice of cake. That's what we were selling. And I kind of talked about him and riled him around a little bit. And he just kept on messing with him. And I said, "You take this cake and don't you tell anybody else that I've given you this cake." And he reached in his pocket and threw $1 on the table and said, "Eat it yourself." And he walked out. So that's how I met him, at a church function.
And what was Elaine like when you first moved here?
When I first moved to Elaine, Elaine was such a pleasant place to be. Not that it's so bad now. We have advantage over a lot of people in a lot of places. But at that time, Elaine was flourishing. The streets were filled, the sidewalks were filled. Not that I'm a public person. I don't care a lot for crowds. I'm very cordial. It's hello and move on. If I can do anything to help you, that I will do. But the town used to be filled with people, but what's so significant to me, when I moved to Elaine, there were 3 doctor's offices. I know definitely 2. I'm trying to remember if there was a 3rd doctor's office here in Elaine. There was a movie theater. There was a drugstore here in Elaine. There was a washateria here. 3 or 4 gas stations. There was a place at Crumrod where you could, it's here in Elaine, but it was called Crumrod, where you could buy all type of appliances. So Elaine was just, you know, really a nice place to be. A few restaurants here and there. A school, by all means, was here, and that we don't have. And all these things that I'm naming now is things that we do not have. A few grocery stores, we don't have that here anymore. And a dollar store at that time, and it left and went away. But recently, we have worked and we have a dollar store, a Dollar General here now. But there were so many things here available, a civic center for seniors to go. It was a lot.
Could you tell me what decade that was that you're talking about when you moved here?
That was in the late 70s.
Okay. And then, so could you talk a little bit more about how Elaine changed over the past, 30, 40, 50 years?
Well, Elaine has changed in the sense that a lot of people have expired. People left. Students left Elaine going to college and didn't return because there was no jobs available here. Elaine has changed because there are no schools here, so you lose that flow of people. No doctor's office here, so people will have to go elsewhere to find a doctor or a clinic. And so Elaine has lost a lot of people. Some people left, I'm told earlier, the narrative is because of the massacre and what took place here, that people left never with the desire to return. So, but from the point that I started, living here, those are some of the changes.
Could you talk a little bit more about the legacy of the massacre? Was it something that was present in the city when you lived here? Is it something people talked about? Did you know anyone who's, descendants or anyone that survived?
Well, now, the massacre took place in 1919, so I certainly would not have been here at that time. But you have your narratives, your parents, and which my parents took a hush-mouth approach. They didn't talk a lot about that because of the fear factors, involved, and the injustice that they were already dealing with, discrimination, etc. But I had an aunt who would kind of share some things, and I have an older brother. You might find some of them in books that Nan Woodruff wrote, documentaries. So, no, I didn't know. I'm not that old.
And what are your aunt and your big brother's names?
My aunt's name is Ruthie Jackson. My oldest brother, he's still alive. He's about 84, 85 years old. His name is Moses Jackson.
Thank you. All right. Well, my name is Kristen Anderson, and I wanted you to detail your path. What jobs have you held and things have you done since living here?
My. All right. Well, so many, so let me see if I can target a few of them. Since I've been living here, I taught school for 33 years. I taught special ed at the high school. You pass it coming in. And for 33 years, I have been very active with students, taking them on field trips and making sure that those with disabilities or disadvantaged had an opportunity to interact with other people and be competitive in Special Olympics and oh my, there's so many things that I've done. My children a lot of time have to remind me of what I've done. I have a food pantry here, and we also we serve here, but I serve at the old high school area where I don't have a 501c3, so my husband and I basically do it out of our pockets and with the help of a few people who might give me $10 or $15 here and there. Oh, gee, I've been a civil rights activist. I've spoken up for people who were in trouble, struggling. There was this one particular case where a young man had pushed a white lady down, and the police was all in an uproar. I serve also on the Quorum Court, which I'm a justice of the peace, and I spoke up for this young man for the simple reason, not that he was so right in what he did, but as it was emphasized to me that he pushed a white lady down, and that's why he's here in jail. But my position was he could have pushed a black lady down as well if I had been there, but he is misplaced. He should not be in jail. He should be in a mental institution. And why so? Because he was eating his own feces. So that told me there that, you know, he was just really messed up. And I played advocate for him, and they moved him and placed him correctly. There's a lot of things that I do in aiding, assisting people when they're trying to get to the doctor and don't have funds sometimes to ride. We are 2 hours from Little Rock, and sometimes they have to go to the hospital there. Parents who are trying to stay over with their sick, family, and they're coming back and forth. We try to provide some assistance for them. Oh, I can't. I just can't remember a lot. Like I said, my nephew presented me in an honorary program for me a list of things. And my brother said, "You didn't do all of that." And the children say, "She really did." So, I forget it because it comes from the heart. I'm a people person. I love people. I hate adversity, and I know that's a part of life. You're going to face, if you're traveling on a highway, there are going to be some rough spots in there. You don't expect a smooth highway all the time. But, I like positive interactions with people.
You mentioned the civil rights activism you've done throughout your life. Are there other examples of that you're proud of, looking back?
Perhaps there would be some that I wouldn't like to go on camera with. But I've assisted people who were kind of having problems and had no means or didn't have resources, didn't have people that they could contact and ask for help. And so I just played advocate. And sometimes in order to share information, you have to reveal classified information, and that's what I don't want to do.
Understandable. Can you talk a little bit about your faith? Growing up, if your parents were very religious, how it's informed your morality.
I'm telling you, yes. I was raised in Faith City. My mother and my dad gave us absolutely no choice. I lost my shoe. I can't find we had Sunday clothes then and Sunday shoes, and I can't find my shoe, so I'm not going today. And my mother said, "Well, you'll just have to go barefooted if you're not." So then you go and find a shoe you hit. But my mother played piano for 4 churches. We used to have one church had service only one Sunday a month. But we went to church every Sunday. So if First Baptist had church today everybody went to First Baptist. And on the second Sunday, if that's Kristen Stone's church, then everybody went to so it was always a large crowd. And we stayed in church, and we had no other choice but to go to church. But my mother was a woman of faith, and she was so dedicated to the community. She was a community person. In fact, she worked so hard. I said to myself and others, I would never do the work that she did, only to find myself, when I look in the mirror, being the exact image of her, physically and the way I work. But yes, they had strong faith and belief in God. And my mother would go and pray for people. She would go and cook soup and, just other food. She'd prepare meals, and she was one of the greatest cooks. If you mention the name Pearla Jackson around anybody, she was a great cook. And she would, I recall just one particular person who had been in a car wreck and was sent home to die. His collarbone was sticking up. He was in a bad condition. And my mother would go and anoint them with, I don't know if she had oil, I don't know, but she would, salves, anything, any healing mechanism that she could use, she would do that. And she really nursed that man back to health. When the doctors had said, he's not gonna make it. He was a mechanic. He was one of the greatest mechanics ever come through. And everybody was trying to haul cars, and he was just sick. He wasn't able. But that was just one example. But she was here and there. Yes, we had faith in God. And my dad's theme song was, treat others the way you want to be treated. You're not responsible for how other people treat you, but you have a moral obligation to treat others right, because the eyes of the Lord is in every place, beholding the evil and the good. So treat people the way you want to be treated. Yeah.
Do you remember the community reaction to the memorial that was posted, that was put up about the Elaine massacre?
The memorial that was put up in Helena?
Yes.
The Elaine community, the majority, and those who are concerned, because a lot of people do not concern themselves with certain issues. They're nonchalant. It doesn't matter either way. But for those who were concerned, they went into conniptions almost. Yes, and even unto this day, when you bring it up, you got a boiling point going, because they felt like that should have been in Elaine and should have been Helena. However, the fact that a man can do with his own what he pleases, you can't attack that. So then my encouragement to my fellow community people is to, let's see if we can generate funds and put it here in Elaine, where it belongs. This is where the blood, sweat, and tears were. This is the bloody grounds that we tread on, that's crying out for healing. Maybe just a confession. Some people say it never happened, and we lost relatives in that massacre. So many things that's ugly transpired. Bodies were dumped in ditches and covered over massive graves. It was just so many horrendous things that took place. And yet some people say it didn't happen. And people feel like, it should have been here. But how can I attack you about something that you're going in your pocket and doing? It should have been here. And I think if they really had Elaine's interest at heart, they would have placed it here in Elaine. But sometimes people do things for self-gratification.
What kind of experiences have you seen in the community in more modern times as far as racism or just uncomfortability or discrimination and stuff like that?
Well, we see it all the time. We see Injustice manifests itself in a lot of different forms. When certain people get certain jobs, then the wages is different. They find ways to do higher wages because of who you are. The town is basically divided. Main Street, for a number of years, divided. The blacks live on the north side, the whites on the south. We have had an opportunity to kind of migrate a little bit to the south side. But for the most part, it's not a lot of difference in it. It's just in the way that people are treated if the blacks are walking the street. Maybe they are stopped by the police or harassed. Caucasians can go and maybe what they did was even worse, weren't more of a punishment, but seem like they get less punishment. Or maybe just a ride home in the police car. So yeah, we still see injustice. We still see discrimination, maybe not on the same scale, but we still experience that unfairness.
Speaking of discrimination, you mentioned that your parents were a little more tight-lipped than, say, your aunt because of the discrimination they faced. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I don't think that my parents were bold as lions. They were. But my mom and dad had 10 sons. And they were slim in stature, but stout as a bull. I have a brother that lives in Cincinnati. I don't know, he may weigh 130, 140 pounds. I saw him take a 32,000 BTU air condition up, about 13 flight of stairs, just in one arm. My mother did not, the fear that they had is they didn't want my brothers to go out and try to avenge them or say something and get in trouble and end up in jail or even get hurt. That brings to mind that my mother opened her doors to everyone. She just thought the world loved her. And I'll kind of regress a little bit and tell you, when she passed away, they had a funeral for 5 hours. And it was over 500 people. Now, it's 636 people live here in Elaine. That's the population. But over 500 people was at her funeral because she was a giving person. She trusted everybody. When strangers came and said that they were hungry, they were lost, they at the end of the road and they're lost, she said, well, you sit right here on the porch and let me go prepare you a meal. But we kept telling Mom, this is a different day. And people have a different mentality. Y'all used to go to bed and didn't lock the door, but you can't do it now. And someone robbed and beat my mother.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And you couldn't tell her, you're so broken, you can't say, I said that, I told you. That would never be able to, come out your mouth. But they did that. And I don't think my mother ever, even though she physically got over it, I don't think she ever mentally got over that. And she probably screamed in her heart so many days, why? Why would they do that to a person who has done so much for the community and continues to do? And so she would not tell her sons who did it because she didn't want them to get in trouble, didn't want them to kill someone. So maybe I forgot the question and strayed away out left field. But no, they were not afraid. Our parents were not afraid, but they may have refused to do something. Now, my dad, there was a gentleman that lived in that area, and he has relatives, so I'd like to really be very careful. But he was a Caucasian, and he was wealthy. And whenever the workers would come up, and they said something that displeased him, he said, "I ought to kick you." You know, he had bad kicking blacks. And my daddy he was a cookie. And you know what? He made us go to Sunday school. He was just a lovable person. But when you rubbed him the wrong way, you met something. And he said, "That's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to kick me." So the man would turn around and walk away. He wouldn't mess with that. Yeah. But no, they wasn't afraid, but they didn't want us. I'm sure they probably felt like if they were giving us a lot of information about going on. It's kind of like Roots came out. And I love telling this story. There was this real cute little Hispanic fellow. He comes to my classes. My classes' eyelashes are so long and beautiful, and he just got teardrops all in them. And I go, "Whatever happened to you?" He said, "Because," and I'll give you just the name, Boyce. "Boyce hit me." And I said, "Well, why did Boyce hit me?" He said, "Well, I called him Toby." Oh. I said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "You asked for that lick, didn't you?" Yeah, so, I mean, you know, sometimes people just can get emotional. If you allow yourself, you'll be drenched with hatred and bitterness. You know, you have to shake it off and realize that's the past and it's part of the past. And what can we do to rectify problems like that in the future rather than dwell on negative things in the past? But sometimes children don't have that strength. When they hear it, just get them all riled up, and you know.
I have to ask, what was it like growing up with 10 brothers?
Hard work, and I tell my children, I said, now, I have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, 2 young ladies and a man now. They all graduated from college. I'm very proud of them. And my son works at the university there in Pine Bluff. But I tell them, I said, "Your chores is so light and simple." I said, "I had to deal with 10 boys. We lived in Mud City. So when they come in, they brought all these chunks of mud in on their shoes." I said, I'd be about to blow a fuse. I'd be steaming because, you know, now I got to walk on this floor, but you can pull your shoes off, leave that mud out there. But I love my brothers, you know. They tell me that I was the chosen sister. But you know, when you're chosen, you end up doing a lot of work. You do know that, right?
You mentioned going to college. Where did you attend, and what was the experience like leaving here and experiencing college?
Well, I did my undergrad work at University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff, which at that time was called AM&N College, which was Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College. I did my graduate work at Arkansas State in Jonesboro. What was it like going? There were a lot of things that I did not have. Going to college, I was determined to make it. There were 4 of us in college at one time. And my dad ended up with a heart condition. He wasn't able to work. And so my mother, at the close of gathering the crop, she would go to Glencoe, Illinois, and work up there, seasons. She worked different places, different seasons. And she didn't have the money to give to me. And at that time, for college, for tuition, at that time, we didn't have all of this convenience that they have now to go to college. So I was determined to make it, and I would go to the Dean of Student Affairs, and I would tell him, I want to go to school, but I have no money. He said, well, how do you expect to pay your loan back? And I said, I'll work hard in the afternoons when I get out of class, and I'll save money up, and at the end of the year, I'll have money, or the semester, which would be from, if it started in August, then it would end in December. I said, I have that money. And of course, he wrote me that promissory note, and I could go to school. And at the end of that season, I would pay him, and then I would say, I need another promissory note. And I did that and made it through college. No, my parents were so strict that I said once I leave home, that I was gonna let my hair down. I was gonna bawl. But when I got to the dormitory, I found out that it was like your parents is over your shoulders watching everything. They had programmed me so well until while the others went to the balls and did everything. I was in the dormitory doing hair and making a little change, yeah. And, you know, I didn't pledge any sorority, because they asked me, what do you pledge? And I said, none fi none, because I have none. But I made it through, yeah.
What did you study in school, in college?
My first degree was in home economics education. I got a Bachelor of Science in home economics, and then I went back and got a master's in special education. Yeah.
And so what did your husband and yourself do for work?
Repeat that, please.
What did you and your husband do for work?
Well, I taught school, and my husband worked on the railroad. Oh, wow. Yeah.
What was that like for him? What was like work on the railroad like?
Working on the railroad meant that would entail being on the road all the time. Every week he was out of town, and they could send him from Turkey to Albuquerque. He would go to Missouri. He would be in Illinois. You know, he just worked all around. But we had a good life. For the first few years, we didn't have children. And so while he was working, I would be at home churching. I had a lot of time on my hand to visit the elderly, the sick, to cook for people that wasn't able. And I understand it now, because I'm almost at that point. It would be nice if someone would bring me a plate. So, yes, but I do that, and I did a lot of canning. I cooked greens. I canned them. You cook them just like you're preparing them to serve, and then you get freezer bags, not storage, freezer bags. And I spent a lot of time canning greens when I got off of work, or peas, cold packing peas. I love vegetables. Yeah, I love vegetables, so I spent a lot of time doing that.
Can you talk a little bit about your teaching career? You know, where you taught and what your experience was like?
I taught here. My first year of teaching was in Eudora, Arkansas. Okay, that's down near the Louisiana line, for 1 year. And we had something like a ferry that would go across, because water was up everywhere, and we had to catch that ferry and go. And I just got so sick of riding that ferry. So at the end of the year, my husband said, you're going to find something to do locally, because, you know, it's just hard trying to get you. And so I moved to I came back to Elaine, and I taught here 33 years, and I had a great career. A great career. I was over the drama club. I love dramatic plays, and I've had some dynamic students coming in singing and acting. They were super good. I was a senior sponsor. I took on a group that was so rowdy that nobody could handle them. So I feel like God had given me favor with those children, and we bonded, so I had established a great rapport with them, and they would listen to me. And my day was a piece of cake and cream. Most teachers, or sometimes, some of them at least, spend their instructional day disciplining students, because they were jumping up and all out of place. I come from a firm disciplinarians, so I myself was a firm disciplinarian. There was nothing that I wouldn't do for the children if they had no money. When we went on field trips, nobody knew it. I didn't allow bullying. I didn't allow one to put the other down. You know, I said, this is a fellowship. that we got going on here. Fellows in the same ship, you know, and you might have advantage in one area. You might be strong in math. Somebody else may be strong in weakness, but let's combine our strengths and not put each other down. So I had a great career. In fact, if the condition that, and sometimes if you see me walk, it's kind of like my guiding rod is not working. I might go to the left or to the right. I had a fall that caused me to come out of the classroom. But I thoroughly enjoyed working. And I turned out quite a few successful students. You understand that I was working with the remedial group, but my principal could never figure out why the remedial group was scoring higher than regular ed students. And he was just saying, y'all need to listen in to Miss Marshall's room and see what she's doing. But you can't teach floating students, and they're cutting somersaults and all that. You got to first get their attention. And I always did that with quietness. If I said something in one tone and you didn't pay me any attention, I said it with a pause and in the same tone, because I expect you to hear me with this level of volume. And I had a great career.
Is there a story from your teaching days that you like to tell? I know teachers have a lot of stories.
Well, I just got too many, and they probably all try to ooze out at the same time. I remember one day, this particular young man, I think he lives in Elaine now. He walked in the room, and he was just going to get the students' attention and distract the whole thing. And I told him, I said, well, first of all, you're so important to me, because if you were not here, I would be an out-of-work school teacher, no class. It's important. You're important. And I said, but it took me 4 years to prepare this. Now, I don't know how someone who has not made that level of degree yet, you know, I just attacked him. I said, coming in, I'm going to take over my class. And so I warned him. And well, I just told him, no, thank you. And he sat down. And then he tried it again. So once I saw that he was trying to take over, then I decided I would make an example out of him. So I said, I don't suppose that the class would miss you a great deal if you would leave, so I'm going to give you that permission. Anyway, sometimes sarcasm works. And he walked out in a few minutes. He was there at the door. Miss Martin, I don't care. He said, I don't care, because I don't want to be in this old room, no way. It's okay, I'm sorry. But I just let him go. And then a few minutes he said, Miss Marshall, can I please come back in? Yeah, but I really had a great time, and I had different methodologies to use with different students. And sometimes children come from homes that they are tore up. And you may be having problems too, but you have to sweep yours under the rug. This is a new opportunity to interact with someone positive and help some child. So I really enjoyed my students. Enjoyed them. In fact, as voting time, the majority of the students that I taught are the ones who put me in the position. And I've been a justice probably ever since 1992, now 204. Try 204, because I may not have, I've lost track a long time.
This is Lauren King speaking. Ms. Marshall, how important do you think it is that Elaine bring a school back into the community?
I think it's important because, number one, those children are bused 40 plus miles. And how I get that mileage is it starts from Snow Lake and they have to get up before day. I experienced that getting up at 4 o'clock to go to school in the morning. I know what it's like. And by the time they ride from Snow Lake out to Marvel, they are just drained. I mean, they are sleepy. They've gone to sleep and they're just waking up, or some have to, to get up. We're here now, and when you do the round trip, that's even worse. That's more mileage. So our school really need to be here in Elaine, so that the children won't have to travel as far, and the school being in the community helps the community to grow in so many ways. There are advantages. If you have teachers that's coming from afar that might have, they are spending money, that's revenue in the town. They might need a place to stay, which unfortunately we don't have hotels here, but I'm hoping that reparations will kind of do that for us. Yes.
You mentioned that your food pantry partially operates out of Elaine High. Is there anything else going on with that building right now?
Say, the food pantry that I have at Elaine High, I have a building which was the old home economics building. And the gym, I'm sure that they are probably doing, that's a separate group and a separate building. So in the gym, probably occasionally, they have basketball games. Not too long ago, they had a fight where one of the local really wants to be, he wants to really be more than an amateur. But they came back and fought, and I don't know if we're encouraging that, I don't know if, I know it's important to put down the guns, but I don't know about picking up the boxing gloves. That has that could have a negative connotation attached to it. So I don't know, it's good to pursue different careers in sports and things, but you have to be careful the image that you are putting, displaying,
But the rest of the building is just abandoned?
The rest of the buildings, yes, they're abandoned and vandalized, and yeah, that's bad. And we ended up, there was a point that we were in academic distress. And there was a lady from Wynne, Arkansas, that was teaching at the time, and I was supposed to be in the special ed building when the principal had a bright idea that I was too successful in working with my children, so he's going to pull me, arrange my schedule so that I could work in regular ed, because my license is K through 12. And we worked together and pulled the school up out of academic distress. Wow. A few years later, a foreigner came in here, and I call him a foreigner because he's from one of the islands, and he couldn't have given two hoops and one holler about this community. Didn't know anything about it, no ties. However, he needed to go out and recruit for a few children. I don't know if we had 22 or 10, I forget that number, that we needed to stay open, because you have to have a certain number of students. And we didn't have that number of students. Had I been the administrator, I would have pulled students out of in-school suspension. I would have recruited to subjacent towns for children who were maybe dropouts or whatever the case was, and I would have brought those numbers up, but it didn't happen. So we lost our school as a result of that.
So you mentioned reparations. What are some things that you think specific to Elaine would feel appropriate as reparations?
The response to that is kind of like Santa Claus' never-ending list. When you start asking for, there's so many things. But you know, if we had reparations that will provide some finances for people, that's good. That's okay. If everybody could get a check, that would be nice. But I think the weightier matter would be if we could get hotels here. Because we're trying to make this a tourist attraction. And people got to have a place to stay. Restaurants. You know, if you didn't have to travel 35 miles before you could go to a doctor, someone could bleed to death in that length of time, or by the time they had to drive down here, that could be crucial. So if we had doctor's office, some of the things back that we have lost, restaurants where people can sit down and eat full course meals instead of just, because everybody don't want greasy chicken, right? And all the, not every day, not every day. So there at Washington, you know, where everybody don't have washers and dryers, and they would have a privilege. There are so many things that we could use. And we're not talking about luxury, we're talking about necessities.
You mentioned that you were voted in as a justice in, you said 2004. Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, I serve as Justice of the Peace, which is county body organization where we have to approve ordinance, and we have to vote on salaries of the president, I'm sorry, the police. There are a lot of things that we do, and it's a 2-year term, so every 2 years we have to run for office. And I've just been blessed to get the support. I've had some tough competition, and sometimes people do like a former president, if you will, that whenever the election is lost, then they find someone or something to blame it on. And I've experienced that too. But, you know, I keep everything straight as I know how, and I work hard. I might not work smart, but I definitely work hard.
Are you still serving as Justice of the Peace?
I've been recently elected, May 24th, I was reelected.
Congratulations.
And I thank you so much, and I'll take that office in January, but now I'm presently still serving. This term will end in December that I'm serving now, and my new term will begin in January.
This is my final question, but why is Elaine the kind of community that you put so much of your time and effort into?
Kind of like a response that Maya Angelou would give you, it's just phenomenally me. It's just phenomenally me. Sometimes you don't know the things that you fight against, the things that you reject, the things that just bitter to your taste. I never do it. You know, it's kind of like Gilligan's Island. Y'all probably don't remember Gilligan. Gilligan said, I won't dress up like a girl, and you can't make me, you can't make me. And the third time, he had the dress on. So sometimes when you've just kind of been programmed to be compassionate and loving and love humanity, it doesn't matter where you are. You got that mission in your heart. But Elaine might be an exceptional place because of what has transpired here. And relatives, friends, loved ones who have lost their life. And this dehumanizing event that took place where people trying to deny that it never happened. And then you get these oral narratives that it was worse than what you know because this took place. That lady told me the other day, she said up at the industrial school is what we used to call it. If you're coming from Helena down here, that's that dilapidated building would be to your left. That used to be what is called the black school. Blacks went there. We were segregated there for a number of years, and the whites were down here at the high school. And I was told that a lot of blacks were killed and buried even in that area. So it just kind of, when you had relatives and friends, acquaintances who have lived in an area and you know they worked hard for a living, worked all day and made nothing, you know, and then that they earned, blood, sweat, and tears, it was taken from them and they were brutally murdered, shot down like an animal on sight. And even some animals are not treated like that. You know, just make you feel a different compassion or just unexplainable sometimes. And sometimes you might become overwhelmed when you get to thinking too deep about it. You have to just kind of turn it loose, kind of like you grab something hot and you got to turn it loose, you know. Yeah.
Well, Mrs. Lenora, are there any concluding thoughts you have? Anything you want to say about your personal history or Elaine's history or anything that you want to make sure you put on the record before we finish up?
Well, I would just like to say time and temperature will not permit me the opportunity to think clearly and to be able to share intricate details about things. But I'm grateful. I thank each of you for taking the time out to travel such a long way to come and interview us. I got great respect for students who are pursuing a career. I want you all to remember that, people, it doesn't matter how much you know, as long as students know how much you care. That's the operative word, care. And I'm glad to see you are pursuing careers, and I wish you the best in your endeavor. And yes, there are so many things that could be said. It's kind of like in a relationship, husband and wife. A good relationship consists of a few words unsaid every day. Unsaid every day. But it's not, in this case, I'm not trying to limit my words, but it's just the not being an opportune time. But I'm thankful that you all are here, and I hope I have shared something. But there's so much to be said.
Mrs. Lenora, on behalf of all of us and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program and the University of Florida, thank you for taking the time for us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Gotta go around. Bear Bryant Museum is like a church. Okay. You walk in, I've never seen a museum. Yeah, but this, you walk in, it's got everything in there, just like you do. What do you mean? You go in, you're quiet.